Welcome, welcome, and Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas. Thank you. I hear that over there. And welcome everyone joining us online. Merry Christmas to you as well. I tell you what, we love a good celebration, do we not? Right, we just love a good celebration. I would look at my mom and my dad when I was a teenager and go, I was made to party. Right? I mean, who wasn't? We love a good celebration. Right? We give high fives, fist bumps, cheers, applause. We give hugs to strangers, right? We give shouts of joy and spontaneous tears in celebration. I think years ago, my sister, she's 6 years older than me. And she would do this thing, right? Some of you can do it where you put your fingers in your mouth and you can like break dogs' eardrums, right? You can just squeal. And I remember at my high school graduation, right? She's squealing as loud as she can. And then she did it at every nephew's and niece's graduation, right? It wasn't her that was graduating, but it was them. And she just loved to celebrate. I think about years ago, finishing the Boulder, right, running those 6.2 miles, right, and you run and you finish in Folsom Field there, Folsom Stadium, and a crowd full of people that don't know you at all are all cheering and celebrating. I was there when we defeated Pittsburgh Steelers at home, right, and a sea of orange celebrated that victory as we went on to the Super Bowl. Right, and we've got two guys sitting next to us. A buddy of mine got the tickets, and two guys are next to us. Pittsburgh Steelers fans, they flew up from Mexico City. Sad day. I was not super kind in that moment. But we were high-fiving and celebrating, right? We were doing that. And then, right, a couple weeks after that, we were the family that took our kids out of school, got them on the light rail and went downtown, and we're part of that million march of a sea of orange, celebrating the Super Bowl victory, because we just love to celebrate. Or even this last summer, my youngest, Zach, and I, we were downtown with a couple and their kids, they're missionaries from northern Thailand. And again, the Avalanche had just won the Stanley Cup, right? Yeah. Awesome, we got a team that's winning, that's good. Right, and so we were down there right in front of Union Station, right? Strangers around us, again, high-fiving as the trucks went by with all the team members on it, just celebrating. And if you watched the World Cup, right, this last week, right on Tuesday, the Argentinian soccer club, they made it home and they'd planned this, right, motorcade through the city of Buenos Aires. And they were going to put all the players on these kind of open air buses. And that didn't work because more than 4 million people turned out. You got to go look for it on YouTube. Like people are sprinting over overpasses and interstates and they're just flooding in all to celebrate, right, their home team. A couple people leapt off the overstate, right? Tried to land on the buses and did that. It got so crazy. They had to bring in helicopters and put the team members on helicopters and do an aerial parade because people just love to celebrate, give praise to their home team. Right? Praise, celebration, applause. I believe they are built into us. And we love to shower them on all the things and the people we love. We think about our sports teams. We shower them with praise and celebration on our family members at births and graduations and in that new home, on our friends with promotions and that house they got and all those things. We celebrate events and performances. Again, there's something central to us. Like we're made to celebrate, made to party and pour it on. And yet, as Julie read, the angel got up and said, "Glory to God," because glory is different. Glory is for God alone. Again, the angel, right, announces, right, the scene splits, the heavens part, and the angels announce, glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace among those with whom he is pleased. Glory, we don't often talk about glory to others. Right? We don't shower glory on other people because I think it's baked into us that glory goes one direction, it goes to God. Glory, right, splendor, brightness, magnificence, excellence, preeminence, dignity, and grace. Majesty. Majesty as a thing belonging to God, a kingly majesty that belongs to God as the supreme ruler of the heavens and the earth, and majesty as the thing belonging to Christ as God with us, Emmanuel, God in human form, right? The absolute perfect inward and personal excellency of Christ, his majesty, his glory. And so as much as we love to celebrate, high five, fist bump, do the whole thing, glory is different. We don't give glory to others. No, glory is reserved for God alone. And I believe this is true, that glory flows to God as water flows to the ocean. Glory flows to God as water flows to the ocean, right? Anywhere water lands on the earth, its ultimate destination is the ocean, right? It goes there. That's its nature. Water can't help but go there because that's the nature of it. It just flows there. The same is true of glory. Glory flows to God as water flows to the ocean. I think about years ago, Julie and I were newly married, and my best friend's wife was a travel agent. She calls us up, and it was January that year, and she says, I've got a crazy deal. We can get all four of us. We can fly to Oahu in Hawaii with airfare, with lodging, and a rental car for about $300 a piece. And we're like, let's do it. Right? Never seen a price like that again, probably never will. And so we flew up, the only time I've been to Hawaii, and it was incredible. For a kid growing up in the cornfields of rural Indiana, that was mind-blowing. And we took our little rental, this like Toyota Gecko or Echo, I'm not sure, right? And we drove up to the North Shore. The North Shore, I'd heard tales of, right? Heard stories of all the surf competitions up on the North Shore, some of the biggest waves in the world. And we drive up there and we park on this little bluff. You can't see the break yet. And we get out of the car and you could feel it. It was a rumble. It was like a low earthquake. And we get out, and I can remember I climbed up that bluff, and all of a sudden you could see the surf breaking at a scale I'd never seen before in my life. And I was just overwhelmed, right? Just completely overwhelmed. And yet also, right, it's that weird where you're overwhelmed, yet also drawn in. It pulls you in as much as it overwhelms you. And I just sat there on this little bluff, seeing it all, taking it all in, right? Amazed and awed by the sheer power of the ocean. That's glory. That's glory. That's God's glory that is announced to the shepherds that night, both overwhelming them and drawing them in. Here's what I believe to be true, though. I think though glory flows to God, I think so many of us, right, whoever you are and however you got here tonight, some of you because, man, you just love it. You look forward to this night every year like I do. Some of you are like, I couldn't come up with a good excuse. Dang it. I won't make you raise your hand. And don't elbow the guy next to you, right? But I believe this is true, that we keep God at arm's distance rather than experiencing his glory. I think we do it. I think we do it for a variety of reasons. I think sometimes it's fear. Maybe you grew up in an environment where God was just kind of that righteous judge just waiting for you to screw up, and he was going to squish you under his thumb. Maybe for some it's confusion. It's like, man, God, Jesus, the Bible, it's all too much. I just don't understand it. So you keep God away rather than experiencing the glory that was announced at the coming of Jesus. Maybe it's apathy. Right, I guarantee you, some of you are here, you're doing it, right? You're checking a box because a family member, whatever, invited you. But really it's like, man, I don't really care. It doesn't really mean anything to me. And so you keep God distant. For some of you, maybe it's anger. Maybe you're watching online and you're not even sure why you're still sticking with the stream right now because you're so angry at God that he allowed that thing that hurt that friend, that family member. Maybe that relationship was broken. Maybe that cancer wasn't healed. And so you're stuck in anger and you allow that to keep God at arm's length rather than experiencing his glory. And maybe for some of you, there is shame and there is guilt. I can remember sitting down with a dear family member of mine and just trying to explain, right, God's love, right, revealed through the birth of Christ, right, trying to communicate that. And she looked at me and she said, but Joel, you just don't know what I've done. And so you keep God at a distance. It's like never visiting the ocean and never going for all of these reasons and never experiencing all that God has for you. Let me tell you tonight that the glory of Christmas overwhelms us and draws us in, just like it did for the shepherds. That's what God's glory does. It is meant to overwhelm you and draw you in. As I sat there, right, watching the waves, I was both sucked in and overwhelmed by all of it. And that's what God's glory does. And especially when we celebrate that at Christmas time, it overwhelms us. We're overwhelmed that God is not distant and uncaring. Again, the angel announces to Mary, his name will be Emmanuel, which means God with us. The Apostle John in John 1:14 says, and he would dwell with us, literally setting up his home with us. No longer is he far off, and that we are overwhelmed by that, but it also draws us in. Draws us in that God sees us for the hot mess that every one of us are. He sees you. And you have not discovered the one sin, the one mess, the one horrible thing that God goes, I just can't get my arms around that. No, my glory is enough for all of that, God would say. It overwhelms us that all power and authority are his, and it draws us in that his love has never stopped pursuing us. Again, as I said, the Apostle John, he referred to his glory as well. See, in John chapter 1, he sits down later in life. He's beginning to write his story. Matthew, Mark, and Luke, all those stories have been out for several years. And John, he's the last surviving member of the original disciples. And they've been asking, John, please tell us your story. Tell us your experience with Jesus. And finally, he sits down, and in chapter 1, it's like a musical crescendo. And he gets to verse 14, and he condenses all that he knows, and I mean like tomes of systematic theology are on these two sentences. And John says the Word, meaning Jesus, became flesh and made his dwelling among us. Literally, that God poured himself into human flesh and made his home with us. And then he goes on, he says, we have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. He says, we have seen his glory. But that word seen, it just barely scratches the surface. See, in the original Greek, this was written, it really means more like they beheld it, that they experienced it. The way he describes it here is this: as we would experience and witness the birth of a child. If you've ever been in the room when a child's born, right, it's overwhelming and it draws you in. That's how John experienced the glory of God found in Jesus. Right, it's those scenes, you've probably seen them, in those hallways in a hospital where that person who has finished their final chemo treatment and they've been declared cancer-free, and they walk up and there's that bell on the wall and they ring it. It's that kind of experience, both overwhelming and yet drawing you in. It's the couple who has fought hard through countless counseling sessions and comes back together, brings their marriage from the brink, reaffirming their vows to one another. And it's the parent that welcomes home the son or the daughter who got lost in addiction. That's that kind of beholding glory that overwhelms and draws us in. And John says that he beheld the glory of God revealed through Jesus, and it drew him in. This is the power of God's glory. It always draws us close, right? That's exactly what it did to the shepherds. And let's be clear, the shepherds are no different than you and I. We are all like those shepherds. And look at what the glory did to them. In verse 15, Luke 2, it says, when the angels went away from them into heaven, the shepherds said to one another, let us go over to Bethlehem and see this thing that has happened, which the Lord has made known to us, right? Let us go and see. And again, they're just like you and I. In spite of their doubts, in spite of their fears, in spite of their encounters with maybe heavy-handed judgments from religious right or their own guilt and shame by their own choices in their past. No, the glory of God revealed to them that night drew them in. As I invite the band to come up, we're getting close to wrapping up our service. Man, the message of Christmas is a simple one. right as the angel announced God's glory, that it both overwhelms us but draws us in. So again, whether you're watching online or here in the room, whatever that reason is that maybe you've held God at arm's length, maybe it's confusion, it's doubt, you just don't understand. Maybe it's fear, maybe it's shame, maybe it's guilt, maybe it's anger, that are all valid, that are all real. I guarantee you, the shepherds didn't have it all figured out. They had their own issues. They had their own reasons for not drawing close to God. And yet the glory of God revealed to them drew them close to the feet of Jesus. So I just ask you tonight, would you take the same risk the shepherds took? Would you allow His glory to both overwhelm you and draw you close in spite of all the reasons you've held Him at arm's distance? Because the glory of Christmas, it draws us in and reminds us that God is with us.